$20. Yeah, it's too much. They're over, I think they're over the morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay.
That's where Shlomo went to. He went to Yeshiva in Modi. Remember, I dropped something off.
Shlomo and Shlomo, yeah. And my son Yermi is also, I mean,
Yeah,
Shalavim is in Modi'in. I mean, it's right outside Modi'in. It's you're right, it's not officially Modi'in.
Just north of that in the month.
Oh, here we go. Okay. Why is this not here we are. All right, so I wanted us to get some closure on the whole idea of when an employee can sever his ties with his employer. First of all, there's a whole completely other discussion. When can an employer sever ties with an employee? But here, you know, because Rav Sharaga took us in that direction about a teacher who wants to quit and take the students with him, I felt somewhat hanging on a number of issues. So I wanted to research it a little bit more. And in general, we're going to have to, I think, choose another sefer, because this one, the Hayah HaOlam, is becoming overly technical because it's going through every single detail of real cases. And I don't think that's going to be productive for us. So in the process of finding another sefer, I just wanted to go over some issues relating to this to this topic of employment law. So the Shevet HaLevi, which let's see, hold on a second. Why did I see? Okay, hold on, just give me 1 second. For some reason, yeah, I seem to have. Okay, so this was Rav Vosner, and Rav Vosner's tshuva is on the following case: B'din echad shehechazik yeshiva lebali tshuva. Okay, da'ag avuram vehekim lahem bayit lilmod bo. An individual set up a yeshiva for bali tshuva. He worried over them, you know, took care of them, set up a whole yeshiva for them, ulachancham al mabu'ei haTorah v'hayira, and dedicated himself to educate them al mei mabu'ei, you know, using the waters of Torah and Yiras Shamayim. V'gam sochar rosh yeshiva, he hired a rosh yeshiva. Va'amnam baal hayeshiva haya harishon. But the owner of the yeshiva, he's the founder, okay? Ve'ata kam haram hazeh, and now the rosh yeshiva, like the head spiritual leader, has now stepped forward. V'hotzi et hatalmidim l'makom acher, and he's decided he's going to take them to another place. V'harishon savach, and the founder is now shrine. Ki nishar hu levad, he's now all alone. V'nisharu alav hachoyves shekibel alatzma l'man hatalmidim. He's got all of these debts that he had incurred for the sake of the students. V'hu bocheh umit onein al mitzvah da azli minei. And furthermore, he's crying and complaining about the mitzvah now he just lost. I poured out all of my kishkas for this group of Balei Tshuva, and now they picked up and they left with the Rosh Yeshiva that I hired and put into place. Where's the justice? Okay. We can imagine this happening. Okay. Yeroe elanias daiti de'ein vadai or lanias daiti din vadai de'ein lechapot talmidim lihishaer davka b'yeshiva sherotzim balei hayeshiva. You can't compel students to remain in a place where they don't want to be. So if they want to go to another yeshiva, everyone has a right to go to whatever yeshiva they want to go to. A person can always go learn wherever he wants. There are many places in Shas where we find that great rabbis went from one teacher to another teacher, from one yeshiva to another yeshiva, from Surah to Pumpadisa, from Pumpadisa to Surah, to Masa Machasya, all of these different academies. You had from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. It happens all the time in the Gemara. V'ayin b'chulin in Bal Nefesh Ata, Pro Shemenu, there's even someone got advice that if you are a person whose soul is rugged, then you should go to another place if you're not happy. Amnam zemashenogea l'talmidim shaholchem me'atzmam limtzo ezer ruchanit l'nafsham. But the examples that we have in the Gemara, and by the way, also the laws of kibbud av va'em. Normally, you have to listen to a parent, but if a child says, the parent says, "I want you to go to yeshiva X," and the child says, "I want to go to yeshiva Y," the child is under no obligation to listen to the parent, okay? Because a person has to go to wherever his heart desires. But all of the precedents that we have in Shas are regarding where the student is the one who initiates the change so that he can find some more spiritual satisfaction. Avol b'mikre didan haram mizeh ba ba'orma upitom hotzi talmidim kedei lilmol imahim b'makom acher. He says, but in this situation, the Rebbe who decided to pack up and leave did so under the cover of night, like totally kept the founder in the dark, didn't tell him that his dissatisfaction, just decided he was going to do this and sort of concocted this plot with his Talmidim, said, don't tell the founder, but we're all packing up and we're leaving. So if that's the case, the reason the students are leaving is not because they want to enhance their spiritual growth. It's the same Rebbe that's going with them. And so they're not really changing their educational situation. They're just for the purposes of maybe financial benefits, or they don't want to work under this founder anymore. What difference does it make where they go if they're going to be with the same Rebbe? V'chol ikar kavanaso kedei liot atzma'i ulahapsi lebal hayeshiva harishon. This Rebbe wants to be independent. He doesn't want to have to work under the constraints of the founder, who maybe is telling him, I want you to do this, I don't want you to do that. And he feels, listen, I'm the reason that these kids are coming to the yeshiva now. It's my charisma, it's my influence, it's my pedagogical skills, whatever the guy has. And so Rav Vosner says, I don't really see how the students are benefiting from this change. It's the Rebbe, the Rosh Yeshiva, who's benefiting. Va'af shagam rav v'ram yachol lazo ve'enu meshubad lihishar la'olam u'chemavur kol zeh b'poiskim mikol makom zeh pashut k'sha'ozev k'derech ha'olam. He says, and it's true that a rabbi or a Rosh Yeshiva can leave his employment at any time and is not indentured to stay forever. This is all explained in the poskim. Mikol makom zeh pashut k'sha'ozev k'derech ha'olam. Said, but that's only when he leaves in the normal fashion. Va'ozev ma'atzmo belila orer gam l'talmidim lazov. Right? He can't take the students with him. In other words, you want to go somewhere else, great. But if you're going to cause all of the students to go with you, v'im achar kach yavo al talmidim acharav, ein lo lebal hayeshiva alav afilu tar umot. He says, if a Rebbe leaves a school, right, and the students end up following him, but he's not encouraging them to go, So then the founder of the dean of the yeshiva can't have complaints. Aval hacha ayin rasa shaharav hazeh azav pitom uchenir gam orer et talmidim lazov. But over here, that's not what happened. Over here, the Rosh Yeshiva picked up in the middle of the night without giving any advance notice. And it seems, based on the circumstances, that he encouraged the students or arranged that the students would come with him. And as a result, the founder of the yeshiva now has lost his mitzvah that he's been doing for so long. And we know that the Shulchan Aruch and Aruch Chaim Siman Kuf Nun Dalid says that you're not allowed to take a mitzvah from somebody else. If a person had a mitzvah that he was used to doing, it's asur for you to take his mitzvah. Siman Kuf Nun Dalid Sif Yud Dalid. What does the Shulchan Aruch say over there? Kuf Nun Dalid. Sif Yud Dalid. So the Shulchan Aruch says, and I'll share this with everyone who's watching. Ein madlikin ner shel hedjot miner beis hakneses. Let's see. Aval kasher lavos mutar ulizar berkach madlikin behen ner shehu l'tzarach gadol shekam mishtas. I must be looking at the wrong halacha. Let's see. Kuf Nun Dalid, Sif Yud Dalid. No, this is, hold on. What? No, it's specifically in Aruch Chaim. Let's see. No, it was, let's see. Ein madlikin ner shel hedjot miner beis hakneses. You're not allowed to light your private candle from the candle of the shul. V'yesh mishomer dahani mili ba'od shedolkin lemitzvasan. Aval keshetzarech lechabosan mutter. But that's only if they're burning to provide light for the shul. But if they're about to put out the light, then you're allowed to light from the candles of the Beis HaKnesses. Hagam mihu lo nagu lizar b'kach umadlikin bahen ner shehu l'tzarech gadol. Ve'efsher shagam shadas based in masna b'kach.
So you're trying to draw a comparison between that
The light and the student.
and the students, or the teaching at the school.
But like also in the school, you can take the students with you, but you cannot take
But you
the
can't take the
students.
students, or you can't change it if they're still in the process of teaching.
I think that there's some error in the reference.
I've been doing connections for a while.
Good try.
Yeah, it's a bit of a stretch. Yeah.
Yeah, but I get more correct in connections. And
6 o'clock in the morning.
Let me just see.
You're fully awake.
Kuf Nun Dalid, Sif
Pushing
Yud.
coffee.
Okay. Anyway, the Gam Yesh Bazeh Drora de Mamona. And he also says that there's a financial issue over here. Kevin Shabal HaYeshiva Nichnas La'ol HaChoyves Kedei Lekabel Kesef Avor HaTalmidim Mimakom Shuhuv Ta'lo. Bless you. Since the founder of the yeshiva has entered into debt in order to raise money for the sake of the students, right? And so he's assumed personal debt in order to be able to continue running the yeshiva. And also from donors. ועכשיו שהתלמידים הלכו והוא נשאר מחויבס, הרי הרם הזה הזיק לו בממונה. This was the problem that we had with Rav Shraga's tshuva, because he didn't take that into account in his psak, the financial damage that this teacher is causing when he leaves. Im b'derech gram, im b'derech garmi. Even though you want to argue that it's causative damage, v'gam im hu ba'ofen d'lo nuchal l'chayvet haram l'shalim al pi halacha, and granted that we may not be able to obligate the Rosh Yeshiva who just packed up and left with the students, we may not be able to obligate him financially to pay because it's only causative damage. Mikol makom ein safek hira gedola asa ba'amav. But there's no question that he has done something evil by packing up and leaving this guy holding the bags. Lahashminas hakarka mitachas ragli balei yeshiva, to pull the rug out from under this founder of the yeshiva, the chen lo ye'asa, and therefore should not be done. So this is how Rav Vosner concludes the tshuva. He doesn't have anything additional. And it's based on this that I found something from a psak din from the Beis Din of Yerushalayim. He says, Haruchnius yishaer oto davar kan v'kan, that if the spiritual level is going to remain the same, whether the students are in yeshiva A or in yeshiva B, rak shahamokom oiver v'gam hamenahal yitchalev, but they're just changing the place from A to B, and the dean of the yeshiva, the administrator, the head administrator, is being switched. Mistaver she'ein bazeh tar b'chachma. There's no increase of wisdom for the students, which is normally the dispensation that anyone has to go to wherever they want to go. Shaharehu oto malam, because it's the same teacher. Ela she'enu me'unyan liyot tachat chasuto shel hamenal hakoidem, ela liyot atzmai. He's not interested anymore just in being under the administration of that administrator. He wants to be independent. So he says, Zed davar pashut, she'im hatalmidim ba'atzmam rosim la'azov et hatalmud Torah, v'lalechet l'makom acher, pshita she'yev shalamona. See, it's one thing if the students themselves want to leave, they're not happy there, and they want to go to another place. You can't stop the students from leaving. Even if by their leaving they're going to cause problems for the original school to remain in continuing its operations. Because a person can always learn Torah wherever his heart desires. But if a teacher wants to leave the school, and in so doing is going to take the students with him, and through that, the original yeshiva will have trouble staying open. It could be that it's aser. Because this menahel has established a chazaka, a precedent that this mitzvah is his. He's running the yeshiva for kids, and you're not allowed to take the mitzvah away from him. And he again provides this reference for the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Siman Kufnun Daled Sif Yud Daled. And again, I just don't know what we're seeing from here, unless there's a tour over here that talks about this idea. No, it's in Hilchos Beis HaKnesses, but I don't see what I don't understand what the reference is. Honestly, I don't see what it is. Shuv heruni shezachisi lechavein ledas hashevet alevi, and he quotes this tshuva from Rav Vosner. Benidon Rambi Yeshiva Shehotzi Etzal Talmidim L'Makom Acher, etc., etc., etc. And he says he quotes the Tamtzit. Va'ayin sham shahosif b'sof hatshuva diyesh bazeh gam drawer de mamona. And he also points out that there's going to be a financial issue at stake. Kevin Shirosha Yeshiva Yesh Lo Chovos Avur Talmidim, because the founder, the administrator of the yeshiva, has incurred debt. Because so there's going to be causative damage, and he says, he just basically quotes everything that Rav Osner has said. We can't hold you liable financially, but it's still not proper for you to do this. So this is Dayan Weiss. So you have both Rav Osner and Dayan Weiss actually disagreeing with Rav Shraga, who was much more liberal in this case. So I'm glad we were able to see this a little bit more carefully, because it's not as simple as Rav Shraga had presented it. Because he felt that there's nothing you can do. You can't stop the Rebbe from leaving.
Can you bring the Rebbe to Beis Din? He's taking the student with him.
All the Beis Din would be able to tell him, yeah, you could take him to Beis Din. The Beis Din would tell him, essentially, if they agree with this psak, that what you're doing is wrong, you're not allowed to do it. But there's no financial issue that they can hold him liable for. So now I just wanted to share with you that there's this whole article in Tchumen, Chose Avoda, Mahuto Ubitulo, a work contract, its essence and whether it's something that can be broken. And this is the second part of this whole discussion, and this is from Itamar Varhaftik, Rabbi Itamar Varhaftik. This is the second part. The first part was in the previous volume of Tchumen, where he talked about when an employer can sever a contract with an employee. Here is Chazarat HaOved. When can the employee sever his contract with the employer? And here you have this is a lengthy article, because here you have Chiyuv Davar HaAved, and he goes through a whole bunch of different things that are discussed in the Gemara. And so I figured I would just maybe get started with this discussion with you together. So he says, let me see how I can, how do I change the size?
Finger control.
And the mouse. Finger control. Organize.
So that's not doing it, because this is no, because it's this proprietary software. It doesn't work the same way. But all right, we'll try and slide it across. Mavo, the introduction. B'mamar hakoydem asaknu b'chazarat ha'mavid, ka'it nidon b'chazarat ha'oved. Tchila yesh lahaktim kama hakdamot. So we previously talked about the employer's rights. Now we'll talk about the employee's rights as far as when he can sever his work arrangement. We have to make a number of introductions. Sugei ha'oivdim, poel v'kablan. So we saw this distinction in Rav Shraga's tshuva as well. There are two types of laborers. There is the poel and there's the kablan. We have seen these two terms being used before. What's the difference? What's a poel and what's a kablan?
What kind of contract?
No. A poel works by the day. It's a time period. A kablan works by the job. The project. Right? Okay. In biyachas lechazarat ha'ma'avid, ra'inu ki kimat ve'ein hevdel bein poel v'kablan, or sachir v'kablan. So when it comes to an employer being able to sever a work contract, there really is no difference between whether the person he hired is a day laborer or a kablan who's hired for a job. Hooray, let's see. Hooray biyachas lechazarat ha'oved yesh hevdel barur b'neihem. But when it comes to an employee severing his contract, there is a very clear distinction between these two types of worker. Lo hare chazarat zeh kechazarato shel zeh. They differ halachically. Hagemara bekama mekamot mevi'ah divrei Rav ki lefoel ma'amad miyuchad. A poel, according to Rav in the Gemara, has a unique status. V'hu rashai lachzor bo afilu b'chatzi hayom. A day laborer can quit even in the middle of the day. V'hatam dichtiv kilo b'nei Yisrael avadim avadaihem v'lo avadim la avadim. And Rav bases this on the pasuk in the Torah, which says that the Jewish people are my slaves. They are not meant to be slaves to slaves. And therefore, no human being has a right to enslave a Jew. But that's not the intent. And therefore, a person who is working at a job cannot be compelled to continue working. That's the basic principle. It's based on the biblical idea of slavery. Bebraisa bebava mitzia ayin vava midbeis, kefi shepursha begemar sham mavur, ki beinyan zeh nechloku tanoim. There is a machlokas tanoim on this topic. The Rabbanan kol poal, bein sachir bein kablam rashai lachzor bo, v'yad poel al ha'elyona kaloshen hagemara sham. According to one opinion, it makes no difference what kind of worker you are, whether you're a sachir or a kablan, whether you're a day laborer or hired for the job. You can always sever your ties with the employer, right? And he always has the upper hand. V'ilu l'Rebbi Dosa yesh hevdel bein sachir v'kablan. But according to Rebbe Dosa, there is a difference between a sachir and a kablan. V'rak sachir rashai lachzor bo. Only the day laborer can quit midday, but a kablan is not allowed to quit mid-job. V'kach sover gam Rav, v'chein halacha kemuva lahalan. And that's how we pass. Kan lefanenu rayon gadol, kasher hamishpat mitarev b'chofesh hachozeh. So there's an important idea whenever we deal with the adjudication of the freedom of or freeing oneself from a contract. Ulahala nire ad kama hit arvut zem magia, the kovea ki chose bein ma'aviru poel sachir niten lebitul al yedei hapoel. What comes out halachically is that any employment contract for a sachir, for a person who's hired for a certain period of time, can always be broken by the employee. Okay? Chofesh haprat adif al chofesh hachozim. That the chofesh, or the liberty or the freedom of the individual, is better than the freedom of the contract. Uvemilim acherot, or in other words, maruto shel adon hakol kodemet lemaruto shel adon zeh ma'avid. That the authority of the master of all trumps the authority of the employer, of the master of this business, which is the employer. B'miskeret zeh ein hamakom laharich b'inyano shel rayon niskav zeh, al kol panim aleinu ladun b'nifrad b'chazarat poel u'b'chazarat kablan. So we're not going to expand on this idea, but it's a very lofty idea that a person can say. In other words, the whole idea of the liberty of an employee is predicated on the fact that I have two bosses, I have two employers. One is the Ribono Shel Olam, and one is the guy that I work for. The Ribono Shel Olam is my higher boss, and therefore he says you have the liberty to quit whenever you want, even if my boss says that I don't. Okay, so that's the attitude that he's presenting here. Sug acher shel oved hu eved ivri, hanimkar l'shei shanim la'adono. Another type of employee is an eved ivri, who is purchased for 6 years and is indentured to his employer. Rashaihu liftot atzmo betoch tekufa zu bal karchu shel ha'adon yidei giron kesef. And he too can quit, so to speak, provided that he comes up with the cash he needs to redeem himself and pay back the person for what he purchased him for. I remember one of my first contracts from my first employer. one of my first employers when I was in Pennsylvania, we decided to leave in mid-contract, and I had gotten a signing bonus to commit for a certain number of years. And so they said, yeah, you can resign, but you have to give back the bonus, which I did, right? In other words, of course, it's like the Eved Ivri, who, as long as you come up with the cash for what I paid for you, you always have the liberty to leave. That you have to return based on the number of years that you've already worked versus the number of years that you have left.
So it's prorated.
It's prorated. You have to give back. Lo naasok bidino ki im lechasheniz dakek lahashvoto lepoyel. We're not going to deal with the Eved Ivri right now because it's not a practical halacha, but we'll only discuss how his halachas are relevant to an employee. So hefsed hamaviru trufato. But what about the loss to the employer when the guy quits mid-job? So we'll leave it here and we'll discuss this in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Okay? Everybody have a great day. We will continue.